What I'm about to share flips the script on human history. By the end of this video, you'll see why prehistoric humans were much smarter, more sophisticated, and more complex than we thought. Why human settlement, stable, permanent living, existed hundreds of thousands of years earlier than we're told, and how our adherence to flawed ideas has completely hindered our understanding of history. So what if everything we thought we knew about our origins is wrong? Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Michael. I have a degree in ancient history, and on this channel, we discuss the unexplainable mysteries of our past. Let's get into it. In this video, I want to challenge two deeply entrenched ideas that are still widely accepted in mainstream science and academia, both of which I believe are completely wrong. Firstly, the so-called cognitive revolution, the popular claim that humans suddenly became intelligent around 50,000 years ago. And second, the belief that we remained exclusively nomadic until the Neolithic Revolution, only settling down to build permanent communities about 12,000 years ago. These narratives, while popular, are almost certainly wrong, and what's more, they have distorted our understanding of the past. By clinging to them, we've built a perspective of human history that's not just incomplete, it's fundamentally flawed. Now, if you've watched my videos before, you'll know I bang on about this quite a lot, but that's because I believe it's so important. I believe our adherence to these ideas is warping our perception of history. Let's start with the so-called cognitive revolution. According to many leading academics, something extraordinary happened roughly 50,000 years ago. A sudden explosion of symbolic thought, language, art, and advanced tools, seemingly out of nowhere, when Homo sapiens finally achieved modern intelligence. This view is still widely accepted in mainstream anthropology, with prominent scholars like Professor Richard Klein writing in Stanford magazine, 45,000 years ago, humanity was transformed from a relatively rare and insignificant large mammal to something like a geologic force. His influential book, The Dawn of Human Culture, published in 2002, promoted this view to a wide audience. Other prominent academics, such as Professor Stephen Meathen, Professor Ian Tattersall, and Professors Thomas Wynne and Frederick L. Coolidge, have all also written prominent books supporting this idea. However, the cognitive revolution argument really took off in the public imagination in 2011, when Israeli professor Yuval Noah Harari published his international bestseller Sapiens, which sold almost 50 million copies worldwide, entrenching this view in the public consciousness. But recent evidence has made it abundantly clear that this argument, while simple and easy to digest, is completely wrong. Proponents of the cognitive revolution argument claim that it wasn't until this revolution that Homo sapiens became behaviorally modern. They define modern intelligence as exhibiting key characteristics such as symbolic thought and art, complex language, burying our dead, and planning. They argue that an explosion of remarkable cave art, mostly found in Europe and dated to this time, is evidence that this is when humans got smart. However, in recent years, a ton of new evidence has shown that these capabilities didn't only emerge 50,000 years ago, but instead stretch back much, much deeper into the past. Long before the so-called cognitive revolution, we find stunning traces of symbolic thought etched into the archeological record. At Blombos Cave, from 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens engraved intricate geometric patterns into ochre, strung deliberately pierced shell beads into necklaces, and crafted finely worked tools, suggesting not just utility but artistry and identity. At Tinchamet and Kafka caves, also from 100,000 years ago, humans carefully buried their dead with grave goods, hinting at beliefs about death, memory, or the afterlife, concepts steeped in symbolism. Classy's River and Escul, dating as far back as 135,000 years ago, reveal the use of pigments and personal ornamentation, forms of self-expression, status, or group identity. At Pinnacle Point, from 165,000 years ago, humans didn't just use ochre, they heat-treated stone to improve tool quality, indicating abstract reasoning, planning, and perhaps even ritualized behavior. But even deeper in time, sites like Capthurin from 285,000 years ago and Orglasali from 300,000 years ago both show signs of pigment processing, experimentation with color, perhaps tied to body art, ritual, or communication. Taken together, these discoveries show a mind capable of abstraction, symbolism, identity, and meaning, far earlier than we're taught.
So from the beginning, Homo sapiens were creating ornaments, burying our dead, seeking pigments, decorating ourselves and our surroundings. We clearly already had symbolic intelligence, but that's not all. No, this symbolic behavior likely went hand in hand with complex language, because symbolism and language are deeply intertwined.
Anatomically, we see that the structures needed for speech were already present in Homo heidelbergensis, a species dating back to 900,000 years ago. Their hyoid bone, responsible for complex vocalization, is virtually identical to ours, suggesting the capacity for speech already existed. Then there's Neanderthals, who not only had a similar vocal anatomy, but also shared the FOXP2 gene, critical for speech and language development. Both Neanderthals and Homo heidelbergensis had brain structures with Broca's and Wernicke's areas, the regions responsible for speech production and comprehension. This suggests that the neural architecture for complex language was already in place, long before Homo sapiens even emerged. Even gestures and mimicry seen in bonobos and chimps today point to the deep evolutionary roots of communication. Taken together, this suggests complex language didn't suddenly switch on during a revolution 50,000 years ago, an idea that's based on literally zero evidence, but instead evolved slowly and was likely in use before Homo sapiens even emerged, forming a foundation for the symbolic behaviors we see deep in prehistory. But here's the key. Evolution doesn't invent features for future use. If the hardware for speech existed way back then, it was being used. Language likely offered immediate benefits. You don't get syntax without structure or grammar without need, so the idea that language suddenly switched on 50,000 years ago collapses under the weight of the evidence. Complex language was likely in use hundreds of thousands of years ago, before Homo sapiens emerged, laying the groundwork for the symbolic culture we see etched into our deep past.
The implications of all this, therefore, are huge. There was no sudden cognitive revolution. Modern human behavior existed from the very start of our species, over 300,000 years ago, and likely in hominid species that came before us. We've been smart all along. And that makes sense. If our bodies were fully anatomically modern, as the Jebel Irhoud remains show, why wouldn't our brains be too? But as I've been alluding to, there's a real shake-up here, and that's that this intelligence wasn't unique to us.
Neanderthals are often seen as dumb brutes, but the evidence says otherwise. They crafted sophisticated stone tools, they made glue, and they buried their dead. They built boats and crossed the Mediterranean, reaching islands like Crete. They created stone circles that were likely ceremonial, and they painted cave art just as advanced as ours. They made and wore jewelry, they used medicinal plants, and they even had salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, on their teeth.
It's clear, Neanderthals weren't primitive, they were just as intelligent as Homo sapiens. But it wasn't just Neanderthals.
As I mentioned, our shared ancestor with Neanderthals, Homo heidelbergensis, also showed signs of advanced intelligence. Aside from their capacity for language, sites like Schöningen from 300,000 years ago show they crafted finely balanced wooden spears, designed for planned hunting with precision. At Cima de los Huesos, from 430,000 years ago, dozens of individuals were deliberately placed in a deep cave, a form of ritual burial. These clearly weren't mindless cavemen, they were thinking, planning, cooperating, just like us. This suggests that modern behavior, complex intelligence, doesn't just stretch back 50,000 years, as the cognitive revolution model suggests, but instead back to at least Homo heidelbergensis' emergence around 900,000 years ago. And if that's true, it means our entire perspective of the past needs to change. Because if modern intelligence stretches back almost 1 million years, the possibilities are endless. We need to get rid of this old view, because it's distorting the lens through which we view history.
To further illustrate the intelligence of Homo heidelbergensis, let's move on to the second major myth about our past. Another one I believe is completely wrong. The idea that humans were exclusively nomadic until the Neolithic Revolution, that we only begun to build permanent settlements around 12,000 years ago.
To begin, let's talk about our brains, our bodies, and our biology, because everything about us points to a deep, natural tendency to build, create, and settle. Even children, with no training or prompting, instinctively build. Give them blocks, sticks, or just some dirt, and they'll construct shelters, walls, and little huts. It's hardwired. We aren't just tool makers, we're space shapers. From an early age, we impose order, boundaries, and meaning on the world around us. And biologically, our species is built for stability. We form tight-knit social groups, rely on cooperation, and pass down knowledge through generations. That kind of social structure demands continuity. It thrives in a place where people can stay, build, and return, not just roam endlessly. In fact, even our physiology suggests we weren't designed for constant nomadism. We have no fur, our guts are tuned to cooked food, we have relatively slow reproduction, very long childhoods, and extended care for the young and elderly. That's a lifestyle far better suited to semi-permanent, if not permanent, living arrangements, not endless wandering.
So if even our children build instinctively, and our biology pushes towards stability, why do we assume permanent settlements only began 12,000 years ago? That's what we're going to challenge next.
There are several remarkable sites that shatter the idea humans only settled down 12,000 years ago. One of the most striking is Kalambo Falls in Zambia. Dating back nearly 500,000 years, this site contains evidence of an engineered structure built with advanced woodworking. Archaeologists uncovered interlocking logs, notched and joined together in a way that clearly shows deliberate construction. Alongside this were platforms and cut wood pieces, likely used to build raised surfaces or walkways. This wasn't a makeshift hunting camp, it was a structurally engineered space, stable, intentional, and meant to last. A dwelling, a house, or a structure, the kind of effort you put into a place you plan to return to or never leave, all built by Homo heidelbergensis.
Kalambo Falls thus pushes the very idea of settlement back by over 400,000 years. But it wasn't a fluke. It's part of a broader pattern that suggests permanent habitation, structure building, and spatial planning were present long before cities or farms. And it's also yet more proof that advanced intelligence has much deeper roots than the conventional model suggests.
Another site that powerfully challenges the nomadic-only narrative is Gesher Benot Yaakov in modern-day Israel, dated to around 780,000 years ago. This site shows clear spatial organization, distinct zones for butchering animals, tool-making, plant processing, and multiple hearths used repeatedly. But here's what's especially striking. There's no natural shelter nearby, no caves, no rock overhangs, yet this site shows signs of year-round occupation. That means one thing. They must have built structures. You don't live year-round in an open-air environment without constructing shelters, especially not one with fires, organized activity areas, and long-term tool use. Gesher Benot Yaakov wasn't a short-term hunting stop. It was a planned engineered living space, built and maintained by early humans nearly 800,000 years ago. Far from being nomads, they were already settling, organizing, and shaping their environment to suit long-term life. Then there's Terra Amata in France, dated to around 400,000 years ago, where researchers found traces of hut-like structures with stone weights used to hold down walls, organized hearths, and defined living spaces, strong signs of deliberate shelter building. And at Bilzingsleben in Germany from 370,000 years ago, archaeologists uncovered circular arrangements of stones, interpreted as foundations for shelters, along with a rich spread of tools, bones, and work material, again pointing to planned space use and possibly permanent dwellings. All these sites show compelling evidence of early human construction and long-term occupation.
These sites don't just hint at structure, they scream it. Across continents and hundreds of thousands of years, we see the same pattern. Early humans weren't just wandering, they were building, staying, and shaping the world around them.
But here's the thing. Sites like Kalambo Falls and Terra Amata, these are just the few that almost impossibly survived. Most early structures were likely made from wood, reeds, or hide, materials that rot, erode, or vanish over time. Especially in open-air environments without caves or sediment protection, those traces are gone within a few millennia. Add to that the sheer passage of time, hundreds of thousands of years, weathering, tectonic shifts, erosion, and sea level rise, and it becomes clear. What we found is just the tiniest sliver of what's once existed. So the absence of evidence isn't proof that humans weren't building, it's a reflection of how fragile that evidence is. The preservation bias gives us a warped picture. We've mistaken silence in the record for silence in reality. And when even that tiny sliver includes huts, hearths, construction, and planning, stretching back nearly 1 million years, we have to ask, how much more are we missing? How common must permanent structures and settlements have been?
When you step back and look at the evidence, from Kalambo Falls to Gesher Benot Yaakov, from Terra Amata to Bilzingsleben, it becomes undeniable. Humans have been intelligent and building for hundreds of thousands of years. Not just surviving, not just wandering around, building, shaping space, planning, creating homes. The idea that we only just began constructing shelters or settling down only 12,000 years ago isn't just outdated, it's backwards. It ignores the ingenuity, adaptability, and intelligence that defined our species from the very beginning.
So maybe it's time to tear up the old rulebook on what we call civilization and how long something like it, permanent settlement, has truly existed. For over a century, the model has been stuck on the same template: agriculture, cities, bureaucracy. A definition born from ancient Mesopotamia and projected backwards, as if nothing else could possibly count. But what if civilization isn't just boxed in by this old model? What if it's about settling and shaping the world around us? Look at the evidence. In Australia, indigenous people practiced fire stick farming for over 50,000 years, using controlled burns to sculpt ecosystems, encourage new growth, and attract grazing animals. A masterclass in ecological engineering. At Fragility in Italy, from 170,000 years ago, early humans crafted heat-treated digging sticks to extract roots and tubers, tools that not only required skill, but also an understanding of seasons, soil, and resource cycles. All of this points to one conclusion. This wasn't just random dumb brutes surviving, these were intelligent, deliberate acts of environmental mastery, not passive foragers, but early humans settling and actively engineering their world.
I think it's time we redefine what we mean by civilization and start giving our ancestors the credit they deserve for the complexity, ingenuity, and sophistication they undeniably possessed. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Sign up to my new Patreon for loads of bonus content. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment below, like, subscribe to the channel, all of that. Thanks so much for being here.